We are now ready to jump into Blender and begin modeling our bird. Before I start though, I want to go over a few changes that I have made to my Blender install that make it a little different from the official build. Obviously the theme is different, it's the Moto theme, but it's just pretty to look at in my opinion. But there's two add-ons that I use all the time that I highly recommend, and it has to do with scene organization. And since this is a huge project that we're taking from start to finish, scene organization is crucial, especially when it comes to the layer system that Blender uses. Which is great that it's in there, but it's lacking an obvious thing, I think, to most people, and that's there's no way to name the layer, and there's also no way to distinguish what number the layer is. Like if I hover over these boxes, it doesn't give me a name, it doesn't even give me a number. So it's really kind of counterintuitive to have a layer system but have no way to label the layers or distinguish one from another except by turning it on and off. Though this isn't always a huge deal, like if I'm just doing a sculpture and a retopology, it's not really that big of a deal. I only need, maybe between 2 and 4 layers to do that whole process, and I can just remember 1, 2, 3, and 4 pretty easily. But by the end of this project, we're going to have a ton of objects, including widgets for our rig. We're going to have the rig itself. We're going to have different feather layers that we're going to want to separate. And it's going to get really confusing and hard to remember where all these objects are without naming our layers. So the two add-ons that I have installed deal with layer management. So if I open up my preferences with Command, comma, and if I type in layer, and the first is scene layers and managing those scene layers, and the author is Alfonso Anuruma. I apologize if I've butchered your name, but he's done 2 add-ons that are great layer management add-ons. One for scene management and one for bone layer management. I've included these add-ons in the source file, so again I highly recommend that you install and use them. The scene layer management shows up in the tool panel under the title of layer management. And when we open that up, we can see that we have very nicely organized sets of 5 layers matching what we have down here in the header. And we have layer names, which seems so simple, but it is so crucial to good organization. We also have select the objects in this layer. We have the ability to lock all the objects on this layer. And then the button off to the right is the command to move the selected objects to this layer. So if I quickly add a mesh monkey, the default way to move an object to a layer is by hitting M. And we can see our layers that by clicking one, we move this object to that layer. So we can see over here that I moved that to layer 6. But again, if I want to move this to a specific layer, like layer 17, I don't know right off the top of my head which layer is 17. And sure, I can, I guess, mathematically figure it out or get used to it, but it's just annoying to have to, I guess, count to layer 17 if I know that that's where I want to put this object. Over here on this far right button, we can go straight down to layer 17, or if it's named, go to that named layer that we want and just click that button and it appears in that layer. We can also have the ability to hide empty layers. So if I click this option, hide empty, we can see that layer 1 is the only layer with objects in it. And this is a nice feature because we can see with that off, it pretty much takes up the entire tool panel. So I like to turn that on actually. The other script deals with bone layers, which I will go over once we get to the rigging portion of this training. But yeah, those are the add-ons that I have installed and will be using throughout the course of this series. Alright, so if you've seen any modeling videos from me, I think you know how I'm going to approach this. That's right, form sculpting and retopology. And just to remind you of the reason, I have found that for me this method produces the highest quality models, both in form and topology. Because by sculpting I can focus on form with the more artistically intuitive sculpting system without worrying about topology. Then once the form is achieved, I can focus on topology without worrying about form. And by isolating my attention on each aspect one at a time, this gives me a much higher quality model in the end. So I will get rid of my monkey here. And first things first, I want to set up some reference images. So over here in the in panel, we have background images. Let's turn that on, open up the drop down, click the add image button. And the axis, I'm going to go ahead and make it the front. And then click open so we can go find our image. And it's called Art Ortho. Now in my viewport, I'm going to hit 1 and 5 so we can see our image. We have some options down here to line the image up a little bit better in the viewport. So in the Y option, I'm going to slide that so that our feet line up with the red line, which is the x-axis or our grid floor. And then with the X slider, I will click that, and then you can hold Shift while you're sliding, which will make it a little bit more of a precise movement, because without it, this thing's jumping all over. So I'm just going to go in close and get this blue line, which is the Z-axis. I'm going to get that lined up with the middle of our artwork. There we go. That looks good. So I'm going to have to add another image. Let me click that Add Image button again. And the view axis, I'm going to make it the right view. And instead of opening that image again, I'm going to click this other button to browse the images that are already linked into this Blender scene. And go ahead and pick Art Ortho. And then hit 3 in the viewport to take me to my right view. We can see in the top left, it's the right orthographic view. And we can see here that this green line represents the grid floor, just like the red line did in the other view. And with our other image, we've already set the Y location of our background image. So I'm going to go over here to our first image, going to hover over the Y value and hitting Control C to copy that value. And then in the second background image, hovering over that Y value, I'll hit Control V, and we will see that it pops up to exactly the same Y value as the other image. And then I'll have to manually slide the X value to kind of line up. I want my blue line, which is the Z axis, to line up with the middle of the foot. There we go. That's going to be good. Now jumping back and forth, we can see our images lined up, which will guide us along as we model and sculpt our bird. So to get started with a mesh, I'm going to hit Shift A and use Jonathan Williamson's method of adding a cube, and then coming over to the modifiers panel, adding a subdivision surface modifier, making the view levels 2, and then hitting Apply. This kind of gives us a spherical shape with much better topology than the UV or icosphere. So tabbing into edit mode and moving all of my elements up. The reason I do that in edit mode is so I can leave the object's pivot at the origin. Then I'll hit SX to scale these vertices in the X direction to kind of line up a little bit better with our artwork. Jump into the right orthographic view with the 3 key and hit SY to scale in the Y direction. Rotate it just a bit, just to kind of ballpark line it up with our artwork. And that's all I'm going to do in edit mode. I'm ready to jump into sculpt mode now and discover the shape of this bird. So down here, let's jump into sculpt mode. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on dynamic topology because that's going to be a crucial part of this sculpting exercise. So over in the topology drop down, let's turn on enable dynamic, and I'll leave the detail size at 3. But I'm going to turn on collapsed short edges. We can see immediately that our mesh is triangulated and being understood by dynamic topology. So I'm going to grab my snake hook brush and start pulling a head shape up. Because it is the snake hook brush, we are dynamically seeing more geometry created as I move, and it follows my brush stroke, which is pretty cool. A very useful feature of dynamic topology. So there we go. That's the head shape. Let's go ahead and pull out a beak shape now. And I'm just making my brush size smaller and smaller as I get to the peak of the beak. I'm rhyming. Cool. And then let's pull out a lower beak. There we go. So if I jump into my front view, we can see that it looks good from the side, but it's obviously way too skinny. So let's go ahead with the snake hook brush still. Let's just pull that out to the side. That looks fine. Jump back to the side view. Let's work our way down the torso and the abdomen. Let's just bring out these shapes. The shape for the tail. And then let me pull out a piece for the leg. I'm just going to ballpark the area where the leg connects to the abdomen and pull that down. I'm sure it's going to look bad from the front, but anyway, just keep pulling this shape down. Might not have enough geometry, so let me change the detail size to 15 and then pull the leg down like this. All right, let's jump to the front, see where we're at. That's not terrible, but it's also not matching our artwork. So I'm going to turn my detail size back down to, or back up to 30. And I'm going to turn off collapse short edges for now. What collapse short edges does, if you don't know, is as it dynamically creates new topology, collapse short edges forces all the new faces to be the detail size. So that means if I go over a spot that has a finer detail size than 30, when my brushstroke crosses that area, it's going to de-res that section to be 30 instead of what it was before 13. So that just means that you'll lose any detail that you put into that area. So I'll be turning this off in a little bit once I want to maintain the detail that I've created. But for now, I'm just pulling out the most basic forms, and I want the topology to always be dynamically generating itself to be a detail size of 30 for this phase. Anyway, so I've got that turned off now because I want this detail size of 15 in the leg to be maintained while I manipulate it over here into shape. So let's do that and just kind of make it match up with the artwork. Grab my inflate brush, just inflate that size up a bit. Maybe turn the detail size down to 15 again for this area. There we go. Smooth out that area. Also, another setting that I like to use is in the options drop down at the bottom we have unified settings, size and strength, which by default are turned off. I'm going to turn them on because when I change to each new brush, I want the size and the strength to be the same instead of different. I don't want to have to remember that my inflate brush is much stronger than, say, my pinch brush. I want them all to be the same, so I only have to remember the size and strength one time instead of per brush. So anyway, when I do that, my brush is usually really, really small. You can barely see the little green dot, which is my brush icon. So hitting F will bring up the size. Hitting Shift F will take the strength from 0. And let's make that a little bit more mid-range. And then now I can smooth out the mesh and it reacts a little bit more appropriately. Inflate the size again and just kind of match that up. Now let's bring out the knee. There we go. Move it away from the crotch region, I guess is what that is. Jump over to my side view. We can see that it's still matching up fairly well. I can inflate in this little skinny section to make it match up. Here we go. Now let's jump out of orthographic view, see what it's looking like. So it's obviously really, really jagged and very low resolution, but right away I can see that the meat of this leg is non-existent. It's way too skinny. So with my inflate brush, let's go ahead and bump that back up, or not back up. I guess it's never been right. So my detail size of 15 is probably a little too much. Let's bump it up to 20. I don't want my geometry to get too heavy too quickly. Turn on collapse short edges, and then you'll see my geometry modify itself to be a size of 20. All the new faces to be the size of 20, and just kind of inflate the shape up to give it a little bit more bulk, and also smooth it out as I go to get rid of the jaggies. And then through this crotch region as well, I will just inflate it up, smooth it back. Inflating and smoothing is the way that I like to get rid of the jaggedness and kind of make a more unified topology across this sculpt mesh. So that's what you'll see me doing a lot, is inflate and then smooth. You can see it gets rid of the jaggedness, and around the area that I'm working with, I want it to be a little bit more of a unified density in the topology. So yeah, I'll go ahead and concentrate on this leg region while I'm down here. Hit Shift C to bring up my crease brush. And the crease brush does exactly what you would think. It creates a nice crease by both pinching and pushing downwards in my brush stroke. The default is set to subtract. I'm going to turn it to add to behave more like my other brushes. And then let's kind of pinch that area down in the connection of the leg to the torso. So with collapse short edges, what you'll notice is, let me just stroke in this area a lot, And you'll see that the geometry is pinching in towards itself, but at the center of the stroke where everything is pinching in, once the topology gets a little too fine or below a detail size of 20, it goes ahead and remeshes that area. So we're never getting that really, really fine pinch. So this is good to know. In the future, I'll want to turn collapse short edges off, because with that off, I can now pinch all those polygons into itself, and it gets really, really fine because it's not remeshing the polygons that are below a detail size of 20. Anyway, I try to explain the collapse short edges. It makes sense in my head, but I feel like I can never explain it properly in a way that most people understand. But anyway, I'm going to undo those strokes and keep collapse short edges on, because I don't really want those really fine creases just yet. I just want to get the idea of those creases into my geometry. So I'm going to continue creasing along the connection of the leg to the torso. Also underneath the crotch where it kind of attaches with the tail. And then out here we don't want really that crease. We want it on the inside, but not on the outside. So I'm going to keep that smooth. Just continuing to smooth, with the smooth brush, smooth all my geometry down to kind of keep all my topology somewhat consistent across this area. And that's what I'll do for each area that I work on, is try and keep the density of the mesh somewhat consistent. Just makes sculpting nicer. And that's a beauty of dynamic topology, that I can pick and choose which areas I want to be what density. And that's pretty cool. It's actually very, very cool. Anyway, with my crease brush, again, let me just crease in. Well, it's a little too strong. Shift F to decrease the strength. I'm going to crease in this joint down here. Smooth it out. And then with my grab brush, I'll go ahead and pull it this way to kind of straighten out this little wonky hitch in the leg, the ankle. Continue smoothing. And I want more density in this part of the leg, so I'm going to inflate and then smooth it down. Here we go. Add some more density, some more bulk up here to this section. And I haven't checked my artwork in a while. Let's see if it's still matching. It is fairly close to the artwork, but I can bring this section in a little bit more. Maybe with my crease brush, let's crease it a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time down here on this leg right now, because again, I haven't even pulled out the arms yet, so I don't want to get too detailed. You can see the difference in density for this leg compared to the rest of the body. So I think I have spent a little bit too much time too early down there. So I'm going to try and not speed things up, but you know, cover the entire body before I advance in the sculpting so much like I did in this leg. So for this foot, what I'm going to do, it's a little bit different, and I need to, let's see, iron out some problems in the topology. Yeah, forget it. Down here in this foot, we can see in the artwork, and speaking of artwork, I only have the orthographics up, which is not the best way to work. So I'm going to kind of change my UI over here. And since there aren't that many objects in the scene right now, I can bring up my properties panel and then split this view, something like that. Go to my, in this lower one, go to my UV image editor, image, open image, go back to my art folder and bring up my, my final piece of artwork, because this is what I want to reference the most when it comes to sculpting. The orthographics are helpful, and they certainly have their place when roughing out these initial forms. But once I get to a certain point, I want to focus more on this artwork, because this gives me the feel of the character. The orthographics, you know, I did my best with trying to put the eyes in the right spot and give it a more neutral face, but you can tell that the artwork is way more appealing than these orthographics. So the orthos I like to use only for the initial form, the volumes of my shapes, and but for the majority I want to use this artwork over here to the left. And we can see that we have 3 toes on the foot, 3 big toes with a fair amount of detail. And then on the back, we have 1 other toe, just standard bird feet. Now, to achieve this, I'm only going to sculpt this middle toe. So I can spend the proper amount of time on 1 toe and get it looking right. But these other toes are duplicates of this other toe. And so I don't want to take the time to sculpt the same toe 4 total times. So once that toe is finished, I can either duplicate the mesh and boolean the toe by itself, or I can just leave it that way until I get to the retopology phase and just, duplicate the retopology of the toe around. I don't know for sure just yet, but this is an example of kind of my modeling process when I sculpt for practicality rather than to be looked at. This sculpture is not going to be rendered. I'm not going to show this off in a reel. It's purely for practical usage. So I'm only going to sculpt areas that I need to have, forms that I need to have for my retopology. And the toe is an example of where I only need 1 toe to retopologize, and then I can duplicate that around, not wasting time in the sculpture. So I'll go ahead and do that. Jump into, let's see, my perspective view with 5. And then I'm going to take my draw brush and very aggressively kind of add this nub right here, which will become the toe. So by kind of protruding that nub out there, now in the side view, I can, with my snake hook brush, let's see, go up, grab snake hook, and then, well, first things first, I don't have the toe far enough down. The leg has not been brought that far down. So let me pull that. And now back to my snake hook brush. Let's decrease my brush size and bring this toe out. We can see my topology is not, the detail size is not fine enough. So let's turn that to 10. Zoom in a little closer. Try that again. There we go. Now with my inflate brush, let's just bulk up that toe. My grab, kind of move it into position. So you can probably see that I like to initially use the snake hook brush to pull out the form just initially, and then quickly turn to my other brushes to finesse the form. For the back toe, I think I am going to pull out just an initial kind of nub for that shape. That way, let's see, now that I've got that pulled out, bring down the bottom to be flat, bring out the ankle to give it a little bit more bulk, smooth it out. This way I can sculpt in this area to match the artwork. We can see that we've got some nice little creases and other forms down here, which I want to include in the sculpture, so I need more geometry in that area. But yeah, this is what I'm going to be sculpting with. It's going to look really goofy, but again, it's just for purely practical reasons. There's no reason to waste that time sculpting these other toes. Let's see, now my detail size is a little too fine. So let's, not 5, let's change that to 20 again. Here we go. There we go, get a more appropriate density in my mesh. And now I'm going to work on this toe to try and get it to feel a little bit more like these toes in my artwork. There we go. I want to give it, you know, some knuckle here, and then smooth in between to make that thinner, a little less big. Kind of give this, you know, ribbing over here, kind of an exaggerated old man finger almost to the bird toe. Here we go. I need to pull out a claw now. So again, with my draw brush, just going to focus it here on this area. Here we go. Now with my snake hook brush, let's just pull that out. And since it comes to a point, the claw obviously starts out thick and then, you know, tapers down to a point. We can change our curve to be this fourth option from the left, which is like a peak in the curve, which is exactly the kind of shape we would need to pull out a claw. So let me do that now. I might have to do it a few times. That's okay. There we go. We've got a nice, very sharp claw. See, I want to smooth that out towards the tip, but I don't want it to shrink down too fast. So that's going to be fine. Okay, I do think that I need my other toes during the sculpting stage so I can bulk up this ankle, and the toes will give me reference for how that ankle needs to look, even though I don't want to sculpt them. So what I can do is jump into object mode, hit Shift D, and move this duplicate of our sculpt off to the right a little bit. Now I can hit Shift A mesh cube, bring up a little mesh cube, scale it down, and then move it in a position so that it cuts off this toe. I think I want the toe to be about that distance. Remember, this is the one I'm looking at. So I can tab into edit mode, flip the direction of my normals, and then select my duplicate sculpture, add a modifier Boolean, and now pick my object, which is cube 2. Now if I hit Z, we can see in wireframe that my toe is cut off from my body, which is awesome. So I'll hit apply that Boolean, delete that cube, tab into edit mode, select this top, this other half of the mesh, or actually we can see some weirdness that I guess happened. I have two separate meshes that dynamic topology sort of gave me. That's kind of funny, kind of weird. Let's see, maybe I can just select this toe, hit Control I to invert the selection, and then delete the vertices. There we go, tabbing into object mode now. We have just our toe by itself. I do want to kind of move the origin or the pivot point of my object to be a little bit more appropriate. So selecting this vertex in edit mode, hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and then in object mode, Shift Control Alt C will move my origin to the 3D cursor. There we go. Now when I rotate, it's rotating around the base of the toe where it connects to the ankle. All right, so I can just move this now into position to kind of represent my other toes. There we go. Now it will be much easier to sculpt the ankle area of my foot to match up with these extra toes. So I'll jump back into sculpt mode with my inflate brush. Let me just start inflating and giving some more meat in this area. I don't think dynamic topology will still be turned on. Let me turn that back on and continue inflating, giving me some meat so I can line up the geometry with the other toes that I've added. And we can see that there's a pretty big hole in my mesh, which is kind of weird. I'm not used to that happening from dynamic topology. So perhaps I'll jump into edit mode real quick, find my hole with the border vertices selected, hit F to fill that hole. Hopefully that fixes my dynamic topology. Let's see, if I inflate or turn on dynamic topology, now inflate that area. There we go. That fixes that hole, sort of. Anyway, again, my geometry is unimportant at this point. I just need to brute force it into shape. There we go. I think that's going to be good for now. I don't want to forget the rest of my body. So in the next video, I'm going to finish up the arms and especially the head. The head will probably be the biggest challenge to translate this 2D artwork and 2D appeal into 3D.